Keep coming back to you for more on that. Some news is coming in. Let's go straight to that. According to a senior official during a closed session of the Quad Summit in Tokyo today, U.S. President Biden has praised Prime Minister Modi for handling the COVID pandemic successfully in a democratic manner, contrasted India's success with China's failure to handle the pandemic, though both countries are of comparable size. He added that the Prime Minister's success has shown the world that democracies can deliver and busted the myth that autocracies like China and Russia can handle the rapidly changing world better because their leadership can take and implement decisions without going through lengthy democratic processes. According to the official, these remarks from the President Joseph Biden appeared to be unscripted as he made a special intervention to say this before his prepared remarks. So this praise from the US importantly coming in. Obviously, comparisons will be drawn between China and India, given that the population size is almost the same. China, of course, has not been able to handle the pandemic well in the sense that they've used an iron hand to launch a brutal crackdown on its own people, as opposed to what India has done. Paulami Saha is getting us more details on that. Paulami, first, give us an idea about what exactly has been said by President Joseph Biden and in what context did he bring this up?
Well, Sneha, what we're learning from our sources is that even before President Biden made and in your spoke of the prepared remarks that you already had in an unscripted intervention, ahead of that, he in fact praised Prime Minister Modi in India for the handling of the COVID crisis here in India. And he, of course, said that as far as the crisis is concerned, India, in comparison to China, which has almost a population of a similar size, comparable size, was able to better handle the situation through democratic processes. He says that this completely busts all myths that autocracies like China and Russia are better able to handle crises that are presented because of an ever-changing world order. They're able to handle it better simply because they do not have to cut through lengthy democratic processes that they seem to, suggest that in sort of a crisis situation, their processes work better because they're not lengthy and time-consuming. But what has now been demonstrated by India, U.S. President Joe Biden said, is that with the way India handled through democratic processes the COVID crisis, it just goes to show that democracies like India are better equipped to handle the changing world order. This praise not only coming in from the US President Sneha, even Prime Minister Kishida of Japan and the newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had similar remarks to make. Anthony Albanese, of course, going on to say that India's supply of vaccine to other nations, especially under the Quad vaccine initiative, has been widely appreciated, that India came to the aid and support of various nations with a made in India vaccine. Similar statement being made by Prime Minister Kishida as well, saying that, countries like Thailand and Cambodia, which received vaccines from India under that Quad initiative, the vaccine initiative, are ever so grateful and thankful to India for, in fact, doing so. In fact, the Cambodian Prime Minister was present at the time when the first lot of vaccines had arrived from India in Cambodia. So India's role in handling the COVID crisis, in coming to the rescue of several nations with the supply of vaccines, is being widely appreciated, and some very strong words, in fact, which the US president, in fact, expressed when he compared it to China, saying an autocracy couldn't handle the crisis in a similar manner that a democracy could handle. Just goes to show that autocracies like China and Russia aren't necessarily better equipped to handle a changing world order simply because they seem to believe that they can cut through lengthy democratic processes and skip a lot of levels because of the way they function. But even going down the democratic way, if India can better handle the COVID pandemic and the crisis that it unveiled for the world in 2020, it just goes to show how well India has performed.
All right, Paulami, thanking you for the moment. We'll keep coming back to you for more on that. This is in the context of US President Joseph Biden praising India, saying that democracies function better, and that has been proven given the manner in which India handled the COVID-19 pandemic as compared to Russia, or most importantly as compared to China, which has been in news for all the wrong reasons when it comes to handling of the pandemic. We have, in fact, the President speaking. Listen in.
Prime Minister Modi, it's wonderful to see you again in person. Thank you for your continuing commitment to making sure democracies deliver, because that's what this is about, democracies versus autocracies, and we have to make sure we deliver.
Important developments. U.S. President Joseph Biden says democracies deliver. It is evident given the manner in which India handled the pandemic, particularly talking about India's COVID management. He's spoken about how India has done in terms of vaccine deliveries, in terms of bringing its people together to handle the situation.
The Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Program that's going to bring India and the United States together with other nations to reflect our Indo-Pacific Maritime.
Between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and U.S. President Joseph Biden.
Bring India and the United States together with other nations to reflect our vision for a more open, more prosperous, connected, and secure world.
और यहाँ पे अभी टोक्यो में हमने दो पहलों की ऐलान किया है, जो कि एक है हिंद प्रशांत अर्थव्यवस्था का रूपरेखा और दूसरी जो कि इंडो पैसिफिक इकोनॉमिक फ्रेमवर्क और दूसरा है इंडो पैसिफिक मैरीटाइम डोमेन अवेयरनेस प्रोग्राम, जो कि हमको भारत को और अमेरिका को साथ ले आएगा और अन्य राष्ट्रों के साथ भी, और वो हमारे जो दर्शाएगा अधिक रूप में और समृद्ध रूप में और उसके सुरक्षित विश्व के लिए.
I'm pleased that we've reached agreement for the U.S. Development Finance Corporation to continue its important work in India, supporting vaccine production, clean energy initiatives, and I'm also glad we're renewing the Indo-U.S. Vaccine Action Program.
और मुझे भी ये भी प्रसन्नता है कि हमने एक और एक समझौता अनुबंध अपना किया है अमेरिका के लिए, अपने विकास वित्तीय निगम के लिए, और उसको हम जारी रख रहे हैं और बहुत एक आवश्यक महत्वपूर्ण काम कर रहे हैं, जो कि भारत को मदद कर रहा है वैक्सीन उत्पादन के लिए और स्वच्छ ऊर्जा के निवेश के लिए. और मुझे ये भी खुशी है कि हमने अपना भारत और अमेरिका का वैक्सीन एक्शन प्रोग्राम में भी नवीनीकरण कर दिया है, इसको रिन्यू किया है.
We also discussed the ongoing effects of Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine and the effect it has on the entire global world order. And the U.S. and India are going to continue consulting closely on how to mitigate these negative effects.
और हम इसके ऊपर भी चर्चा करेंगे, जो कि रशिया के क्रूर और अनुचित युद्ध के विरुद्ध जो उन्होंने किया है, जिसका पूरे विश्व पर असर पड़ रहा है, और इसमें हम बहुत बारीकी से निरंतर परामर्श करते रहेंगे भारत में और अमेरिका के मध्य, और इसके ऊपर हम ये विचार करेंगे कि किस प्रकार इसके प्रभाव को हम कम कर सकते हैं.
I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation today. Mr. Prime Minister, there's so much that our countries can and will do together, and I'm committed to making U.S.-India partnership among the closest we have on earth.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री, मैं बहुत उत्सुक हूँ अपने वार्तालाप के लिए, और हम दोनों देश और राष्ट्र इतना कुछ कर सकते हैं और करेंगे मिलकर, और मुझे पूरी मेरी प्रतिबद्धता है कि मैं अमेरिका और भारत के आपस के रिश्ते को, साझेदारी को बहुत नजदीकी बना दूं इस पूरे धरती पर.
मिस्टर प्रेसिडेंट, आपसे मिलकर हमेशा बहुत खुशी होती है. आज हमने एक और सकारात्मक और उपयोगी क्वाड समिट में भी साथ साथ भाग लिया.
Mr. President, it's always a pleasure to meet you, and today we also participated together in a very positive and useful Quad Summit.
भारत और अमेरिका की स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप सही मायने में एक पार्टनरशिप ऑफ ट्रस्ट है.
The India-America strategic partnership is in the true sense a partnership of trust.
हमारे साझा मूल्यों और सुरक्षा सहित कई क्षेत्रों में हमारे समान हितों ने इस ट्रस्ट के बॉन्ड को मजबूत किया है।
Our common interests in defense and other defense and other matters, and our shared values have indeed strengthened this bond of trust between our two countries.
हमारे पीपल टू पीपल रिलेशंस और घनिष्ठ आर्थिक संबंधों में भी हमारी पार्टनरशिप को यूनिक बनाते हैं।
Our people-to-people relations and our strong economic cooperation makes our partnership even more unique.
हमारे बीच ट्रेड और निवेश में भी निरंतर विस्तार होता जा रहा है, यद्यपि ये हमारे पोटेंशियल से अभी बहुत कम है।
Our trade and investment relations are also steadily on the rise, but they are still well below potential.
मुझे विश्वास है कि हमारे बीच इंडिया-USA इन्वेस्टमेंट इंसेंटिव एग्रीमेंट से निवेश की दिशा में कॉन्क्रीट प्रगति दिखने को मिलेगी।
I am absolutely confident that with the conclusion of the India-USA investment incentive agreement, we will see concrete progress in investment between our two countries.
हम टेक्नोलॉजी के क्षेत्र में अपना द्विपक्षीय सहयोग बढ़ा रहे हैं और वैश्विक मुद्दों पर भी आपसी समन्वय सुदृढ़ कर रहे हैं।
We're also increasing bilateral cooperation in the domain of technology, and even on global issues, we cooperate closely.
हम दोनों ही देश के इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र के बारे में भी समान नजरिया रखते हैं और न सिर्फ द्विपक्षीय स्तर पर बल्कि अन्य लाइक माइंडेड देशों के साथ अपने साझा मूल्यों और साझा हितों को सुरक्षित रखने के लिए काम कर रहे हैं।
We both share similar views on the Indo-Pacific, and at the bilateral level as well as with like-minded countries, we continue to work to protect our common concerns.
क्वाड और कल घोषित IPEF इसके सक्रिय उदाहरण हैं। आज हमारी चर्चा से इस पॉजिटिव मोमेंटम को और गति मिलेगी।
The Quad and the IPEF are two important examples of this cooperation, and I believe that our discussions today will give even further speed to this positive momentum.
मुझे विश्वास है कि भारत और अमेरिका की मित्रता, वैश्विक शांति और स्थिरता, प्लेनेट की सस्टेनेबिलिटी और मानव जाति के कल्याण के लिए एक फोर्स फॉर गुड बनी रहेगी।
I am absolutely sure that the India-U.S. friendship will continue to be a force for good, for global peace and stability, for sustainability of the planet, and for human development.
So much. Thank you.
Mr. President, will you push Prime Minister Modi to take a tougher stance on Russia?
Mr. President, did you ask Prime Minister Modi to free himself of Russian oil?
Are you going to help him get some weapons? Are they going to get some weapons?
These are visuals of the bilateral between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joseph Biden. You heard the details in terms of what has been discussed in these meetings. These are bilateral talks. Remember, President Joseph Biden has just, in fact, spoken about how democracies work. India has also shared its concerns as far as the Pacific region is concerned. India and US have spoken about their ties. Geeta, in fact, continues to break down all of those details for us. Geeta, the biggest takeaway really in that sense is the manner in which we now know how the world has watched India and how democracies have worked in terms of delivering vis-a-vis the COVID-19 pandemic. Apart from this, as far as the bilateral is concerned, get us the biggest headline. What do you think is the biggest takeaway from this conversation that both of these leaders have just had?
Well, the biggest takeaway from the conversations that are taking place between US and India is the fact that the two countries are going to work on the commonalities, keeping differences aside. Why do I say that, Sneha? Is because there's a huge difference in how US wants Russia-Ukraine conflict and war to be handled vis-a-vis how India is handling it. But also, like you said, India has been appreciated not just by the United States of America, but also by the Prime Ministers of Australia and Japan when it comes to its COVID handling, while the others appreciated and lauded the vaccines that India sent to various countries. US tried to make the distinction of how COVID-19 handling was done way better in India, and compared it to autocracy, saying that it is not just autocracies who deal with their people in a very high-handed fashion are the ones who can contain such a pandemic, but it is also countries and democracies like India. So a huge comparison made over there. There are many aspects that the leaders are going to touch upon, but what we are looking at over here is also the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and we have to wait and see what US's position, again, re-emphasizing on what US really wants from India and what India's response to the entire concerns with regards to Ukraine is going to be when the conversation gets over. We'll have to wait for the readout, but it is one very important aspect, apart from the fact that they are looking at containing China, resilient supply chains, trade, defense, and strategic partnership, enhancing all those aspects.
Geeta is getting us all of the details of the bilateral that has just taken place between US President Joseph Biden and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Also important, Geeta, and along expected lines, India's position vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine is something that countries have respected, with the president saying that, mentioning of course the brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, and saying that both India and US will continue to consult on the developments in this particular region.
US always takes this opportunity to speak up in any platform that they find now, and especially when they know that the country is a little reluctant in condemning Russia. India has been very clear that there is no condemnation, that there needs to be condemnation of the violence. But in terms of a solution, they're not going to name and shame any one country, that they are looking at negotiated settlement of the conflict that is underway between Russia and Ukraine. So the messaging is very clear. The meeting is still underway, Sneha, because those were opening remarks between the two leaders, by the two leaders for the media. And the meeting is still underway. So we'll have to wait for the biggest takeaway once the meeting gets over. We do know that from the tone and tenor that has already set the agenda for the meeting, that US is certainly going to raise the issue of Russia and Ukraine. That was a part of the conversations that journalists had with White House officials also, and White House officials making it very clear that India is only looking at its interests and its outlook, and that US respects that, although they would have wanted wanted India to do a lot more. But the focus again is on the post-COVID recovery. Trade is going to be very important. Food security, Sneha. We've been looking at the kind of crisis now that faces the world, that the world is experiencing when it comes to shortage in wheat supply, because Russia, Ukraine amount for 1/3 of the global wheat exports, Russia being the highest and Ukraine being the 5th largest exporter. So with them out of the picture, it seems like the West, that is highly dependent on bread and wheat, is going to face tremendous shortage in supply.
Well, absolutely. The talks are ongoing. Geeta, thank you for that clarification as well. To continue to be with us, Geeta just said that these were the opening remarks, but extremely important nevertheless. Paulami Saha got us that story on how the Prime Minister and India's role in terms of handling the pandemic has been praised by US President Joseph Biden. This wasn't a part of a planned remark, essentially, Paulami. And the point that he was trying to drive home is the manner in which India has done as compared to China, given that they can be compared in terms of the population sizes. Here is a democracy, and look at the manner in which it has handled the pandemic, and look at China and Russia's response to it.
Absolutely. You know, these are words of high praise that are coming in from the US President Joe Biden for the Indian Prime Minister and India's handling of the COVID-19 crisis. President Joe Biden, of course, saying that if you look at both China and India, both are of comparable size. And despite that, if India, through democratic means and processes, was able to successfully handle the COVID-19 crisis in terms of the pandemic and its spread, then why wasn't China able to do so? This just goes to show, and it busts myths around the fact that autocratic countries like Russia and China, which seem to suggest and seem to espouse the cause of, skipping through democratic processes because that's how they function, and that is the only way they believe that, things can get done. This just busts that myth. You can follow your democratic processes, you can follow the democratic means, and that is the only way forward and can be successful as well. That is the point that the US president made. He, of course, this was, it seemed, as per the official, who, of course, has spoken with India today. What we understand is that this was not part of the scripted or the prepared remarks of the US president, which he was to make subsequently, but he made a small intervention and did make sure that he pointed that out. Surely he will be, of course, mentioning that as well privately to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the bilateral meeting, which is happening right now at the Kante, which is the Prime Minister's office in Japan, in Tokyo. Right behind me, that bilateral meeting is currently underway for a half-hour slot that it is scheduled to happen over. This will come up, as will the issue of Ukraine, as Geeta was pointing out. Because remember, even in his opening remarks ahead of the Quad Summit this morning, US President, in fact, stressed upon Russia's growing aggression and said that the way Russia had been, in fact, going about this invasion since its start on the 24th of February. Today is the 24th of May, Sneha. 3 months exactly since that invasion. Since the way it has been going around, it just shows that this is not about just military aggression, about invading Ukrainian territory. This is about obliterating Ukrainian culture altogether. And this sort of aggressive behavior should be countered. And that was the strong message that the US president sent out earlier this morning, and is likely to feature as well in the meeting with Indian Prime Minister Modi as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. India and the US will continue with its consultations, is what has been communicated in the opening remarks, is what we have understood. Gaurav Sawant has been to Ukraine, has been tracking that story relentlessly even before the Russian invasion happened. India has been consistent, Gaurav, as far as its own position is concerned. And other countries like the US are respecting the position that India has taken, with the president saying that we will continue with the consultations. As far as we are concerned, our position is clear.
So these are four powerful democracies that are meeting, four perhaps amongst the most powerful democracies in the world: India, the United States, Japan and Australia. And when a signal goes out from these democracies, the entire world listens. Now, the Quad focuses predominantly on the Indo-Pacific, and that is where India's core interests lie, as do interests of Japan, Australia and the United States of America. So you're absolutely right. While the US is emphasizing about four powerful democracies, talking about Russian actions in Ukraine, India, of course, continues to be very firm on the engagement between Russia and Ukraine, a diplomatic way forward and not military way forward. That's been India's consistent stand. 3 months into the aggression, perhaps there is better appreciation that is arming Ukraine the only way out of the situation, or should Russia and Ukraine actually have a dialogue to find a way forward, and that dialogue will continue. But what is extremely significant, while they talk about clean energy, while they talk about taking the world forward in various fields, it is the US president's appreciation of India combating COVID and the manner in which India combated COVID, and a very clear parallel between an autocracy, which is China, and a democracy, which is India. What's the current situation, Sneha? A few people understand medicine better than you and India's COVID fight back. India made the medicine when it came to the vaccine, our own vaccine, the Covaxin, and of course AstraZeneca's Covishield. Not only did this benefit crores of people within our country, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi told the diaspora, but this was actually, sent out to over 100 countries. That's extremely significant. What is equally significant is the fact that the medicines that China sent out, the vaccine that China sent out, that hasn't helped the world. What is it, 38% efficacy or even less? You know that better. And the lockdown that China is witnessing today, and the free movement that we see across India today.
Well, absolutely, Gaurav, since you brought that up, and very, very importantly, this has been recognized by the world. In fact, the WHO in that sense has been very late to acknowledge the failed response of China vis-a-vis zero COVID policy. But today, with these remarks, it really underscores the manner in which China has manhandled the pandemic, especially now, 2.5 years later, where they're locking down people and packing them off to quarantine camps, essentially. That's not the response of any country in this world, barring China. I think, Gaurav, the failure really is writ large.
You're absolutely spot on this, and this is something that Indian officials are also talking about. And now, of course, you have the American president who's talking about how a democracy has handled the pandemic much better, and compare this to the way China is handling it. The Prime Minister, incidentally, you'd recall, also talked about in this period how direct benefit transfer benefited those who remained locked up in their homes. He spoke of this yesterday. He also made a point to emphasize while speaking to the Indian diaspora that 40% of all digital transactions across the world are happening in India. And this again is one place where the Quad will play a very critical role. Very powerful democracies, when they talk about ensuring that money transfers online, digital transactions, they remain safe and free. What's also extremely significant, and Geeta and Paulami can tell us so much more about it, Sneha, is the talk about ensuring piracy on the high seas, smuggling on high seas, illegal fishing on high seas. How will that be tackled by four powerful democracies coming together using technology? And then again, there is one country, the dragon in the room is the one that's indulging in maximum illegal fishing in these waters. Extremely significant aspect there once again.
Gaurav, getting us all of those details. Do continue to be with us. I'm going to go back to Geeta as well, who is our foreign affairs editor, tracking those developments. Food security. Okay, Paulami also continues to be with us. Paulami, food security has been on top of the priority list as far as the US is concerned. Do give us an idea about what India now prepares, or what is India now planning to talk about in terms of the ban on wheat exports, and how are they going to take this problem further in terms of finding a solution to it, given that India is obviously looking at its own concerns first.
There you're right. The aspect of food security is going to definitely come up for conversation between the US President, Mr. Biden, and Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, as well, because this is something which was already alluded to earlier by the US President in his opening remarks ahead of the Quad Summit, when he was, of course, speaking of Russian aggression against Ukraine. He did mention the fact that as a result of this invasion, prices of essentials and fuel products have skyrocketed. Inflation is one of the biggest worries that many nations are, in fact, faces at the moment. So food security is going to be extremely critical. Remember that India had recently banned the export of wheat, but had gone ahead and tweaked that, especially after some sort of request that came in as well from the United States. So this is going to be something very critical, because this is an issue which is being grappled with by all nations concerned. US and India have been extremely vocal about the same. So this is going to be one of the biggest challenges that is coming in at this point of time, and is expected to feature in a large manner in this conversation, in this bilateral, because this bilateral, while it will of course cover global issues like that of Ukraine, is also going to cover issues of mutual interest and mutual concern. So when, of course, the two leaders are meeting right now, we expect to hear from them on this subject as well. It remains to be seen how they, of course, frame their concerns around this subject, and what sort of resolution, if at all, emerges from this meeting. So we're standing by to hear on that.
All right, Gaurav, in fact, the Quad also has, in fact, kept on top of its agenda the discussions around maritime security to track dark shipping in the Indo-Pacific region. Security in this region continues to be on the top focus as far as America is concerned. India also has said that they, in fact, have the same concerns. These are shared concerns in that sense.
Sneha, how did this grouping come about? This grouping came about as China increasingly became more belligerent, as China increasingly did not follow rule-based order, as China's expansionism was visible from Ladakh in the north to South and East China Sea. And this is where democracies came together to say, no, there needs to be rule-based order that needs to be followed by every country without fear of favor. International laws have to be respected, appreciated, and followed. So this is where this is a grouping of 4 countries. So stopping illegal fishing in these waters, and that is where we know where the culprit is or who the culprit is. Ensuring rule-based order, sea lanes of communication remain safe. All of that is something that democracies are trying to ensure. And these are 4 powerful democracies in the region. There are other ASEAN countries that are coming forward because they are also extremely worried about China's expansionism. So China's expansionism needs to be called out, and this is one reason, Sneha, why China is extremely worried about this grouping. China sees this as a grouping that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi seemed to indicate is bound to fail. It's here to have seeds of discord in this region, and that is why you have a grouping like Quad. But that clearly is not the case. It's China's belligerence and China not following rule-based order that is being countered by very powerful democracies coming together.
Yes, Geet, in fact, we'll just go back to Geeta as well. Paulmi continues to be with us. Paulmi, in fact, talking about the constructive agenda that both these countries have time and again stressed upon, we do know that economic security, economic development, especially in the post-pandemic world, given that how the entire world has suffered during this pandemic, is something that's going to be on the agenda. What are the specifics that we are looking at as far as India and America are concerned?
Well, as far as India and America's bilateral relations are concerned, Sneha, they've gone from strength to strength over the past few years now, especially as White House put it in one of the responses that the press secretary had about how India has not taken a very clear position condemning Russia statedly for the invasion of Ukraine. What they said, of course, the press secretary, in fact, mentioned the fact that, India's relations with the United States has only grown over the last few years. While US has seen 5 presidents, India has seen three prime ministers over that tenure. We've seen a huge change in the relationship. The 2+2 dialogues, for instance, have also taken this relationship, the strategic partnership between the 2 countries to the next level as well, where the United States now, in fact, respects India's stand in the world order, respects the role that India has to play in the world order. Once India on board with key initiatives like, of course, so when you speak of economics, like, of course, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which was launched yesterday, a US-led trade initiative, which was, as many see it, an attempt to counter China and its growing economic presence in the Indo-Pacific region. This is especially after the US, under the presidency of Donald Trump, had pulled out of the Trans-Pacific partnership. And at that point of time, there was a lot of concern about the fact how US had no economic presence in the region. Of course, it's a US-led initiative, but there are many countries in the Indo-Pacific. Remember that at least 13 other countries, including India, have committed to come on board the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So all of these countries do see how China is trying to squeeze out the maximum for itself when it comes to economics in the Indo-Pacific region. And they want to counter that. They want to, in some ways, tackle it. Mind you, the framework, the guidelines, the finer details, the fine print of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework have not yet been specified. Many countries that have not still come on board are wondering if because it is a US-led initiative, it is tilting towards the US, or do they stand to benefit as well? Given that it is not, in the most traditional sense, a trade agreement, so to say. It's not an FTA. So what exactly will be the contours of it? They wait to hear. But they do realize, countries like India, that this is an initiative which is required at this point of time, especially when it comes to the RCEP. India had withdrawn from the same as well. So in the absence of a economic framework, the IPEF coming into fruition yesterday is something extremely significant, to which already China reacted. So China is obviously looking at the developments in Tokyo very, very keenly, and believes that this Indo-Pacific strategy, as it calls it, is going to fail. But the fact is, you can only tell from that very categorical and very strongly worded statement coming in from the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi that China is watching and is worried.
China is watching and is worried. Its strategic footprint in the Indo-Pacific region is something that India is looking to challenge and provide an economic alternative to China is what India is really looking at. We'll continue to keep our discussions around this important bilateral between America and India. The talks are ongoing right now. You heard the opening comments. Our focus continues to be on that important meeting. I'm going to